Social Security, I would say, it gets a bad rap, but it has quietly been one of America's best inflation fighters. And it's not, hasn't been forever. But if you go back over the history, and we just got a raise, or if you're receiving Social Security, you got a 2.8% COLA, cost of living adjustment. That starts in January of 2026. That may not sound like a lot on average for people. It's $56 a month. So it's not a lot.
It's something for sure.
But
it's a utility.
It is, I think the reason, and it didn't start, it was 1972, they passed the automatic COLA legislation. And then in 1975, that was the first time Social Security checks went up for inflation. And the reason I think it gets this rap that it doesn't keep up with inflation is that we've had some really different periods of time where social went up a bunch and then we had low inflation and social barely went up at all. In fact, there were a couple of years where there was zero COLA increase because during those years we effectively had zero inflation. But if you go back over time, and I went back to 1975, Social Security really does keep up with the cost of living. So I'll start with the forgotten years. It was 2013 through 2021, and the annual cost of living increases were kind of invisible. They averaged 1% or they were 1% or less. And that wasn't a failure of the system, and it wasn't that it wasn't keeping up. It was because inflation itself was really low. And so roughly 2009 and the 2010s, prices kind of barely budged in the overall economy. So we didn't get much of an increase. If somebody got a $7 increase per month, they just didn't even notice it. And then that, to me, I think that went on for a really long period of time. So people started saying, well, Social Security just doesn't go up for inflation. It was because we really didn't have a lot of inflation. Since, though, 1975, the COLA adjustments, that's when they started, there's been an increase in Social Security checks every single year except for 2009, 10, two years with low inflation, in 2015. Inflation then was effectively zero. But if you look over time since 1975, the average COLA increase has been 3.7%. So almost 4% per year. It's a very real number. Over the last 20 years, it's averaged 2.6%. So the COLA increase we just got is very much in line with that at 2.8%. Now, we did have some huge adjustments. In the late 70s and 1980s, we hit 9.9% one year. That's a big jump. 11%. And then the largest was 14% in 1 year.
Wow.
A 14% raise. Then again, we went through that tame inflation period, 1% to 2%. But then more recently, in 2023, we saw some extremes again because inflation was extreme. We got an 8.7% raise for social in 2003. That was the highest in 40 years. And now it's kind of come back down to earth. It was a little over 3% in 24, 2.5% in 25, and now 2.8% for next year. It used to come in July, and then in the 80s, they amended that, and now we get our raises at the beginning of the year, which I think obviously makes some sense. And again, it was the pandemic inflation surge and that's why some of the more recent years were big jumps. The bigger question, I think, is that the fear of the trust fund running out.
Well, yes, I was going to say, I think since I was in my 20s, I've been told, don't count on Social Security. Don't think it's going to be there. It's going to run out. It's a Ponzi scheme, things like that. And so how much should different age groups think about this as a part of their retirement planning,
Remember what that means. And it makes sense that it gets the rap that's going to go away because the truth is, at the current pace, and Social Security is very upfront about this, that trust fund, the cushion, is set to run out in the year 2032, approximately. They don't know exactly when, but you hear, well, wait, the trust fund's gone. It's at zero. That means social's at zero. And of course, that is not the case. That's just the cushion is gone. And without that cushion, remember, everybody working a wage income job, whether you're self-employed or you are W-2, you still pay into the Social Security system. And we have 160 million people in the labor force. And as long as they're working, they're going to be paying into Social Security on the first X amount of their pay. So that number in itself, that current money coming in, and really it becomes a true transfer system where money's coming in and then going out to Social Security checks. FICA's coming in, the FICA taxes are coming in, it's going right out to Social Security. And that would be able to still pay for 75 to 80% of the promised, in quotes, benefit that you see on that Social Security statement. So I think that's a worst case scenario. Social Security goes down by 20 or 25%. Now that's a big number. The reason I don't think that anybody over the age of 50 has to worry about that is because we've already seen Social Security make some tweaks. They raised the full retirement age by several years. They were able to do that. Mm-hmm. They've been able to raise the amount of income we pay Social Security taxes on. So there have been changes, and it's just a math formula, and it's not that complicated. And I think what'll happen if you really get to the point where the trust fund is let's call it a couple years, and Congress doesn't do anything unless it's emergency. Mm-hmm. I think if we get to within a couple of years of it going to zero, you're going to see some changes in the formula. Maybe they bump the full retirement age up another year, or maybe instead of starting at 62, it's 62 and a half or 63. And those tweaks, they may not sound like a lot, but they can move the math closer to working. But I don't think it's going to happen or impact anybody who today is 50 plus.